Good evening, and welcome to Cold Case Crime Syndicate. Tonight, we have the story of the Black Dahlia, a classic in its own right. The story of Elizabeth Short, cut down in her mid-20s, slain brutally. Originally, she had moved from Boston to Florida and eventually out to LA in the hopes of achieving her dreams of becoming a starlet. Unfortunately, these dreams were never realized. I hope you enjoy the story. If you do, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button, and enjoy the show. The morning of January 15th, 1947, began like any other in LA. The post-war city was booming with life, its streets filled with people chasing the American dream. But that dream was about to be shattered in the most gruesome way imaginable. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Betty Bressinger, a housewife, was walking with her 3-year-old daughter along South Norton Avenue in the Leinert Park neighborhood. As they strolled past an empty lot, something caught Betty's eye. At first, she thought it was a mannequin, pale, lifeless, and discarded. However, as she drew closer, horror overtook her. It was not a mannequin. It was a woman. Her body had been severed in half at the waist, arranged in a disturbingly staged position. Her arms were raised above her head, legs spread apart, and her mouth had been sliced ear to ear, creating a grotesque smile. There wasn't a single drop of blood around the corpse, indicating she had been killed somewhere else and dumped here. Terrified and shaken, Betty grabbed her daughter and ran to a nearby house, where she was able to call the police. The body was soon identified as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, a young woman who had been pursuing fame and fortune in LA. Born in Boston on July 29, 1924, Elizabeth spent much of her childhood in Massachusetts, before moving to Florida as a teen. She had always been drawn to the glamour of Hollywood. With jet black hair, porcelain skin, and striking blue eyes, she embodied the image of a starlet. Yet life in LA had not been kind to Elizabeth. She bounced from job to job, lived in cheap hotels, and often relied on men to help her make ends meet. Some knew her as the Black Dahlia, a nickname allegedly inspired by the movie The Blue Dahlia, 1946, although it's never been confirmed. In the days leading up to her murder, she had been seen in multiple locations, often in the company of various men. But by January 9th, 1947, she seemingly had vanished. LAPD detectives Harry Hansen and Finis Brownen assigned to the case, and it was immediately clear that this wasn't just another murder. It was something far more sinister. The autopsy revealed some horrific details. Elizabeth had been tortured for many hours before her death. The deep cuts around her mouth, known as a Glasgow smile, suggested a sadistic killer. A Glasgow smile, also known as a Chelsea grin or a Cheshire grin, is cutting from the corners of the mouth to the ears. It's said to have originated in Glasgow, Scotland in the 1920s. There were multiple lacerations on her breasts and torso. Her body was ensanguinated, meaning completely drained of blood. Her cause of death was ruled as hemorrhaging from her wounds and shock. The precision of the cuts suggested that her killer had some level of medical knowledge. The fact that there was no blood at the crime scene indicates that she was murdered elsewhere and carefully transferred to the vacant lot. On the morning of January 21st, 1947, something even more chilling happened. The LA Examiner newspaper received an envelope with a ransom-style note made from cut-out letters. Inside was Elizabeth's birth certificate, social security card, and some personal photos. The sender taunted the police, signing the note, "The Black Dahlia Avenger." This suggested to police that the killer was following the investigation and also enjoying it. The gruesome nature of Elizabeth Short's murder sent shockwaves through LA. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime, but the eerie staging of her body that made people feel like something truly evil was at work. The police were also plagued without 500 false confessions, none of which matched the evidence. Over the next few months, the detectives followed countless leads, focusing on Elizabeth's friends, known criminals, and those with extensive medical knowledge. The investigation of this brutal murder led detectives down a labyrinth of false leads, hoaxes, and dead ends. With no clear motive ever established, no witnesses, and a lack of forensic evidence, the case grew colder by the year. Despite all this, there were a few good suspects, some more likely than others. One of the most compelling yet disturbing suspects was Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy physician with a dark past. Why was he a suspect? Well, his medical expertise. Short's body was severed with surgical precision, and Hodel had training as a surgeon. The way that her corpse was bisected at the lumbar spine suggested knowledge of the procedure called hemicorectomy. Hodel's own son believed he was the killer. Years later, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, investigated his father and became convinced he was responsible for the murder. Steve uncovered some damning evidence, including a photo album with a woman that resembled Short, diary entries with cryptic messages, including one that read, "Supposing I did kill that Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now." His father's connections to Man Ray, a surrealist artist whose artwork eerily mirrored the way that Short's body was posed. There was also wiretap evidence. In 1950, the LAPD placed hidden mics in Hodel's home as part of an investigation into child abuse allegations. He was accused of molesting his own daughter. The recordings captured Hodel saying what he had formerly told his son. And also, "This is the best payoff I've seen between law enforcement agencies. I'll be in the clear." Unidentified screaming was also recorded from his house, possibly from violent activity. He also fled to Asia in 1950 and lived there for decades, avoiding additional scrutiny. Though he was never officially charged, modern consensus has him pegged as the killer. Leslie Dillon, aka the Inside Man, was a bellhop and aspiring writer who became a suspect in '48. He was fascinated by crime and seemed to have inside knowledge about the murder. He was considered a suspect due to suspicious letter writing. He wrote to LAPD psych Dr. J. Paul DeRiver, claiming he had knowledge of the crime and discussing it in disturbing detail. He claimed a friend named Jeff Connors may have been the killer, but no evidence suggested Connors even ever existed. Dillon described elements of the crime scene that had not been released to the public. He was held in custody, interrogated thoroughly, but then released due to lack of evidence. While his insights were creepy, there was zero physical evidence linking him to the murder. Most believed he was a delusional crime enthusiast and not a killer. Mark Hansen was a wealthy nightclub owner in Hollywood with ties to Elizabeth Short. Short lived in his home and had a complex relationship with him. His name was in her address book, which was sent to the LA Examiner by someone claiming to be the killer. Some people theorized that Hansen had been rejected by Elizabeth, leading to anger and rage. While his connection was suspicious, no evidence tied him to the crime and he was never charged. Walter Bailey was a retired surgeon who lived near the crime scene. He was a skilled surgeon with expertise in dissection. His daughter also happened to be best friends with the woman who had found the body. This led to speculation about his familiarity with the area where the body was dumped. However, he was never really formally charged or investigated. While I believe it to be a stretch, some people believe Elizabeth's murder was the work of a serial killer who had been operating for some years. The Torso murders, 1934 to 1938, involved a series of victims who were dismembered in a similar fashion to Short. However, these murders took place in Cleveland, and the killer was dubbed the Cleveland Torso Killer. He was never caught, so some people speculate that he changed hunting grounds and moved to LA. All of his murders showed medical precision. And while this theory may sound intriguing, no serious links have ever been found. Despite an exhaustive investigation, the Black Dahlia murder was never solved. To this day, her case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history. The Black Dahlia's legend has endured through books, movies, and conspiracy theories. But one fact remains: a young woman's life was taken in an act of unspeakable cruelty. Elizabeth Short came to Hollywood chasing dreams of stardom, but in death, she became something even more, a mystery and a tragedy that refuses to fade away. Although not a happy ending, I hope everyone enjoyed the story. Please feel free to leave a comment. Have a great night.